When I bought my first house, my parents hugged me so tightly that for a moment, I forgot every argument we'd ever had. "You finally did it," Mom whispered. Dad smiled proudly. I stood in the driveway holding the keys, staring at the small 3-bedroom house I'd spent 8 years saving for. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even in an expensive neighborhood. The paint was slightly faded, the kitchen needed updating, and the backyard was mostly dirt. But it was mine. Every payment had come from my salary, weekend shifts, and years of refusing vacations, new cars, and anything else I couldn't afford. I still remembered the day I signed the papers. My hands had shaken as I wrote my name. The realtor had smiled and said, "Congratulations. You're officially a homeowner." I had stepped outside afterward and sat in my car for almost 10 minutes. Not because I was unhappy, because I couldn't believe I'd actually done it. For years, my family had told me that buying a house was unrealistic. Mom used to say, "People like us don't get houses that young." Dad would laugh and say, "Just rent. You'll never save enough." But I had saved. Every overtime check went into a separate account. I packed lunches instead of eating at restaurants. I drove an old car long after the repairs became annoying. When friends went on vacations, I stayed home. When coworkers upgraded their phones, I kept mine. Slowly, the number in my savings account grew. And eventually, I had enough. I imagined that house as a fresh start. A quiet place where I could finally breathe. A place where nobody could tell me what I owed them. A place where I could close my front door at night and know that everything inside belonged to me. For the first few months, it was exactly that. Peaceful. Then, 3 months after I moved in, Mom called. "Sweetheart, your father and I need somewhere to stay for a little while." I immediately asked what happened. "Our landlord sold the apartment." "How long?" "Just a few weeks." I hesitated. I knew I shouldn't. I knew exactly how these things could go. But she was my mother. And Dad was my father. "Okay," I said. "But only temporarily." Mom sounded relieved. "Of course." They arrived 2 days later with 4 suitcases. Dad carried an old toolbox. Mom brought 3 boxes of kitchen supplies. I laughed when I saw them. "Mom, I already have plates." She smiled. "You don't have the good ones." At first, everything seemed fine. Mom cooked dinner. Dad helped repair a broken fence. We watched television together. For the first time in years, I actually enjoyed having them around. One evening, Dad sat on the porch beside me. "You've done well," he said. I looked at him. "Thanks. I knew you could do it." I almost laughed. "You told me I'd never save enough." Dad smiled. "I was trying to motivate you." "Sure." We laughed. I thought maybe this was what our relationship had been missing. Maybe having them close would bring us together. Maybe the house wouldn't just be my fresh start. Maybe it would become a place where our family could finally reconnect. Then the weeks passed. 3 weeks became 6. 6 became 3 months. One evening, I brought it up. "Mom, weren't you and Dad supposed to have found a place by now?" Mom was washing dishes. "We're looking." "Okay. We don't want to rush into something." "I understand." She turned around. "You don't mind us staying, do you?" I hesitated. "I just thought it would be temporary." "It is." Dad called from the living room. "We're still figuring things out." I nodded. "Okay." I let it go. Then small things started changing. Mom rearranged my kitchen. She moved my pans. She replaced the curtains. She complained that my living room furniture wasn't comfortable. Dad started leaving his tools everywhere. One morning, I found my mail moved from the counter to a drawer. I asked Mom about it. I organized it. "Please don't move my things without asking." She looked surprised. "I'm helping." "I know. I just want to know where my stuff is." She sighed. "You've become very particular." I ignored the comment. Then one Saturday, I came home and found my parents sleeping in the master bedroom. I stood in the doorway. "Mom." She opened her eyes. "What? Why are you in here?" She looked confused. "It's the bigger room." "I know. We were having trouble sleeping." I stared at her. "That doesn't mean you can move into my bedroom." She sat up. "You're not using it." "It's my bedroom." Mom frowned. "You have the guest room." I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. That was the first moment I realized something had changed. They weren't thinking of themselves as guests anymore. They were settling in. I moved my belongings back into the master bedroom. Mom didn't speak to me for 2 days. Dad eventually said, "Your mother feels rejected." I looked at him. "She moved into my bedroom. You could have handled it more gently." "It's my room." Dad sighed. "Family should be flexible." I didn't answer. I was beginning to understand what flexible meant in my family. It meant I gave. They took. And when I finally said no, I became the difficult one. Then came the utilities. My electricity bill doubled. My grocery bill nearly tripled. I asked Dad if they could contribute. He looked offended. We're family. That doesn't pay the bills. We'll help when things settle down. When? He didn't answer. I started keeping track of expenses. Electricity, water, groceries, internet, repairs, everything. One night, I calculated how much extra I had spent since they moved in. It was thousands of dollars. I stared at the number. Then I closed the notebook. I didn't want to become someone who kept score with his parents. So I tried one more time to talk. I think we need to set a move-out date. Mom looked at me. Why? Because this arrangement isn't working. She put down her cup. You want us gone? I want you to find your own place. Her eyes filled with tears. After everything we've done for you, I felt my chest tighten. I appreciate everything you've done. Do you? Yes. Then why are you treating us like strangers? I'm not. You're acting like we're a burden. I shook my head. You aren't a burden. But living here permanently wasn't the agreement. Dad entered the room. What happened? Mom looked at him. He wants us out. Dad stared at me. Is that true? I want us to stick to the original plan. He shook his head. I can't believe this. I looked at both of them. Neither can I. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Dad said something I would remember for years. You bought one little house, and suddenly you think you're better than your family. I felt something inside me break. I never thought I was better than you. Then prove it. How? Let us stay. I looked around the room. The furniture I had bought. The walls I had painted. The photographs I had hung. The house I had spent 8 years earning. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't about a bedroom. It wasn't about groceries. It wasn't even about money. It was about whether I was allowed to have boundaries without being punished for them. I took a breath. I need you both to move out. Mom stared at me. You're serious? Yes. She shook her head. Your father and I have nowhere to go. I'll help you find somewhere. But you won't let us stay. No. Dad's face hardened. Then don't expect us to forgive you. I looked at him. I don't want to hurt you. You already have. He walked away. I stood there alone. For the first time since buying the house, I didn't feel like a homeowner. I felt like a stranger inside my own home. Then, 2 weeks later, my older brother Marcus arrived. And when I saw his truck pull into my driveway, I had no idea that the situation was about to become 10 times worse. 2 weeks later, Marcus arrived. I recognized his truck before he even got out. My older brother had always been the golden child in our family. If he made a mistake, there was an explanation. If I made a mistake, there was a lecture. Marcus had borrowed money from my parents more times than I could count. He had changed jobs repeatedly. He had started businesses that failed. He had moved apartments without paying the final month's rent. And somehow, every time his life fell apart, someone else was expected to put it back together. That Saturday afternoon, I was mowing the lawn when his truck pulled into my driveway. He got out carrying 2 suitcases. I turned off the mower. What are you doing here? Marcus smiled. Good to see you too. He walked toward the front door. I followed. Marcus. He stopped. What? Why do you have luggage? He looked at Mom. She was standing in the doorway. Mom. She smiled nervously. Your brother needs a place for a while. I stared at her. You're joking. No. Marcus walked inside. I followed him. Wait. He dropped his bags beside the staircase. Relax. Relax. I'm just staying for a little while. I looked at Dad. Did you know about this? Dad shrugged. He needed help. I felt my jaw tighten. And nobody thought to ask me? Mom frowned. We knew you'd say no. I actually laughed. You knew I'd say no, so you decided not to ask? Marcus rolled his eyes. It's not a big deal. You're moving into my house. Temporarily. That's what Mom and Dad said. Marcus looked at them, then at me. What's your problem? My problem is that nobody is respecting the fact that this is my home. He laughed. You're really obsessed with that. Because it is. Dad stepped forward. Enough. No, I said. Not enough. Everyone went quiet. I looked at my parents. I asked you to leave. Mom crossed her arms. You gave us 30 days. And those 30 days aren't over. Marcus smiled. Exactly. I looked at him. You're not staying. His smile disappeared. Excuse me. You need to find somewhere else. He looked at Mom. She immediately said, he's your brother. I know. You're supposed to help family. I have. Marcus stepped toward me. You think you're too good for us now? No. Then what's the problem? The problem is that you're acting like my house is a free hotel. He laughed. It's not like I'm going to stay forever. That isn't the point. What is the point? The point is that you didn't ask. He stared at me. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Mom said this was basically the family house now. I looked at my mother. Did you say that? She didn't answer. Mom, she finally said, we're family. That doesn't answer my question. She sighed. You were doing so well. We thought you could help everyone. I stared at her. Help everyone? Yes. You mean house everyone. What's the difference? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The difference was everything. My house had slowly become a place where everyone else's problems were being stored. My parents' housing problem. Marcus's financial problem. Their expectations. Their entitlement. And somehow, I was supposed to disappear inside my own generosity. I walked upstairs. I opened the door to my office. Marcus's boxes were already there. He had started moving things without asking. I turned around. Get these out. He shrugged. There's nowhere else. Then put them in your truck. He laughed. You're serious? Yes. He shook his head. Fine. He picked up one box. Then stopped. You know what? What? You've changed. I looked at him. Maybe. You used to be nice. I still am. No. He shook his head. You're selfish. I felt the word hit me. My parents had used it. Now my brother was using it. I walked downstairs. Okay. Everyone looked at me. Okay, what? I took out my phone. I'm calling the lawyer. Mom's face changed. For what? To formally establish that everyone needs to leave. Dad stood up. You wouldn't. I will. Marcus laughed. You can't kick your parents out. I can. Mom began crying. You're really doing this? I nodded. Yes. She stared at me. After everything? I finally said what I had been holding inside for years. Stop saying that. Everyone went silent. You keep saying after everything we've done for you, as if kindness is a debt I have to repay forever. Mom's eyes widened. I helped you when you needed it. And I helped you. You're our son. And you're my parents. Then why? Because being your son doesn't mean I stop being a person. Nobody answered. I continued. I love you. My voice shook. But I will not give up my home to prove it. Dad looked away. Marcus crossed his arms. This is unbelievable. No, I said. What's unbelievable is that I bought this house and somehow became the least important person living in it. The lawyer arrived the following week. There were difficult conversations. There were arguments. There were tears. But there was also paperwork. And eventually, there was a deadline. 30 days. Everyone had to leave. Marcus moved first. He found a small apartment across town. He complained constantly. But he left. Dad and Mom found a modest rental house. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. On the final day, I stood in the driveway as they loaded the last boxes. Mom looked at me. You really won't change your mind? I shook my head. No. She nodded slowly. I suppose we have to accept that. Dad loaded the final box. Before getting into the car, he looked at me. You're still my son. I know. And we're still your parents. I know. He hesitated. Maybe we can start over. I looked at him. Maybe. They drove away. I stood there long after the car disappeared. The house was silent. For the first time in nearly a year, there were no strangers' belongings in my rooms. No one was using my kitchen without asking. No one was sleeping in my bedroom. No one was telling me that I was selfish for wanting privacy. I walked through every room. The silence felt strange, then peaceful. I opened the windows. Fresh air came inside. I changed the locks. Not because I hated my family. Because I needed to know that my home was mine again. 3 months passed. I didn't hear from Marcus. Mom called occasionally. Our conversations were short. But slowly, something unexpected happened. Without the constant arguments about the house, we started talking about other things. Mom asked about my work. Dad asked about the garden. Marcus eventually called. Hey. I got promoted. I smiled. That's great. Yeah. A pause. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I mean it, he continued. I shouldn't have assumed I could just move into your house. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Thank you. I was angry. I know. I thought you were trying to abandon the family. I wasn't. I understand that now. Another pause. Can I visit sometime? I smiled. Sure. He laughed. Do I need an invitation? Yes. Seriously? Yes. He laughed. Fair enough. Months later, Mom came to visit. She stood outside my front door. I opened it. She smiled. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Of course. She walked into the living room. Everything was exactly where I wanted it. She looked around. It feels different. It is. She nodded. It feels peaceful. I smiled. It is. She sat down. I've been thinking about what you said. What? That family doesn't mean unlimited access. I looked at her. She continued. We were angry because we thought your boundaries meant you didn't love us. And now I think your boundaries gave us a chance to fix ourselves. I smiled. That took courage to admit. She laughed softly. I'm still learning. So am I. She reached for my hand. I am sorry. This time, I believed her. Not because everything suddenly became perfect, but because she wasn't asking me to give her anything. She wasn't asking for a key. She wasn't asking to move back. She was simply apologizing. And that mattered. A year after everyone moved out, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner. My parents came. Marcus came. Everyone sat around my table. Mom brought dessert. Dad brought a bottle of sparkling cider. Marcus brought nothing. He claimed he forgot. We laughed. At one point, Mom looked around. Your house is beautiful. I smiled. Thank you. She looked at me. I'm proud of you. Those words meant more than she knew. Because for years, I had thought earning my parents' approval meant giving them everything they wanted. Now I understood something different. I didn't need to sacrifice myself to be a good son. I didn't need to surrender my home to prove I loved my family. And I didn't need to accept disrespect just because it came from people I loved. After dinner, Marcus helped me wash the dishes. He looked around the kitchen. You know what? What? This place is actually pretty nice. I laughed. Thanks. He nodded. Don't worry. I'm not moving in. We both laughed. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the doorway. The house was quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I remembered the day I had first held the keys. I had thought owning a house meant owning walls, rooms, and a roof. Now I knew better. A home is also the place where you decide what kind of life you will live, who you will welcome, what you will tolerate, and where your boundaries begin. I didn't kick my family out because I stopped loving them. I kicked them out because I finally realized that love without boundaries can turn into resentment. They had mistaken my kindness for permission. I had mistaken guilt for responsibility. And for almost a year, all of us suffered because of it. But once the doors closed behind them, something unexpected happened. We became a family again. Not because we lived together. Because we finally learned how to respect each other's lives. And from then on, whenever my mother visited, she knocked. She waited. She smiled. And I opened the door. Not because she had a right to enter. Because I wanted her there. That was the difference. And after everything that happened, I realized that sometimes the strongest way to save a family isn't to keep everyone under the same roof. Sometimes, you have to give everyone a door of their own. Then let them decide when to knock.